Welcome back to Reynolds Runabouts, everybody. I'm Jeffrey Reynolds, and today I'm going to do some uh, gluing and screwing. I have to put the dashboard in and the kind of the hood that goes over it, um, and then I'm going to do the covering rails or covering boards and the rub rails and the splash rails. It's a good time to get the 5200 out and the brass silicon bronze screws and get this top side area done, all except for the deck. And I will do that when I flip the boat back over to do the deck and the varnish. I'm just going to do it all then, not worry about it. This will give me good structure for turning the boat in the gantry cranes, and it would also allow me to paint all the way up to here with black paint. So kind of getting stuff in order and getting it done so I can finally flip this boat over and do some painting and get this boat right side up eventually, hopefully. And so I'm going to start with the dashboard, which is a kind of a bulkhead for a boat. And this one I'm going to put 5200 in screws, and then I'll put the hood on, and then I'll just progress with the rub rails and covering boards and splash rails. because there's so much added wood to the original pieces that I started out with, when I took apart the splash rails and the rub rails and the covering boards, I thought, well, I'll put the epoxy, Smith's penetrating epoxy on them, see how I do. Was able to save some, not a lot. So that leaves me with the problem of you got a lot of wood here that isn't sealed. So after all the glue ups I've done, and now I've got all the fastener holes where I want them, I want to make sure I have all that sealer back into those fastener holes and on top and bottom of the covering boards and spray rails and such. So what I'm going to do is do the bottoms of the covering boards and spray rails, because I have some fairing I still want to do. Once I get the glue on and the screws in, things change always. There's always a little bit different. It's not as flat as you thought, or the seam isn't where you think it was. So I'm going to go ahead and just do the bottoms, and then that'll be protected. So when I put the 5200 on and screw them onto the boat, they'll be good to go. And then I'll give it a week. You got to let the glue sit for a week, and then I'll go in and do my final fairing before I get ready to flip it over and do the paint. Because eventually that paint's coming around. I'm going to want to have everything ready for paint, regardless if it's top or sides. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. The Smiths, as I've told you many times, is noxious, and I hate the smell of it, and it's probably not even healthy to breathe it. So I always put on a carbon air filter mask when I'm using this. So what you're going to see is me slathering a bunch of Smith's CPES on boat parts, and I'll try to keep it short because there's not much to it. After you see the first one, that's about all you want to look at. But I'm going to start with my little rub rail, splash rail transom ends, and I'll just fill up this table full of parts, and then the next step will be to put them on the boat. So I've got all my parts sealed and laid out in order the way they go from closest, obviously. So what I'm going to do is work my way back and go ahead, and I left one of the bow pieces in place because I need to make darn sure that that thing is registered where I want it. And then I have gone and put a few pilot tests to make sure that it's the right place, and then I marked it so I don't waste a lot of glue on an area that's not even get fastened. So I'm going to go ahead and just pull this off, and I'm just going to put my 5200 in here, and I'm going to apply it, where I know that I'm going to do my gluing. And then I'm going to take a scraper and spread this around so I know I've got a good surface connection to both pieces. So I'm going to be pretty liberal with it, and I can always go back and put more on if I need to. The seal here on the edge is very important because it's been deteriorated over the years, so the glue is going to be in that space. And when I put the lower rub rail on, it will allow me to create a pretty fair surface with both the wood, and that little small crack will be filled in by the 5200, which is fine. And then I'm going to put when the aluminum rub rail is on there, it will cover that seam anyway, so it won't be horrible to look at. It wasn't the best when I found it, and I've done the best I can to correct it. I'm just using a West System serrated spatula, that spreader that I get every time I order epoxy. So I'm going to put that in there right up to where that other rail is going to be. Make sure that I don't get it on the other rail, but I want to make sure it's sealed, and I'm just going to spread this around until I get it right. I know it's going to do its wonderful best to stick, and this stuff is sticky. I can't imagine how, but there's some days I'm like, okay, how did it just get on me there? And it's everywhere, and I'm just so careful in trying to not waste it, but also just keep it off me, which is it's something that if you've ever worked with 5200, it's a struggle. Yeah, it just wants to be on you all the time. So I'm going to release this one as soon as I get this one on, and I'll make sure I've got that 5200 under that seam. Make sure, and this is, I know where it's going to bite me right here. It'll be on the edge, I'll lean, and boom, I'll be in it. And I use distilled alcohol to do the cleanup, which is, in my opinion, just as good as acetone and a whole lot easier to be around, especially if you're not using a mask. I don't even use acetone without a mask because I just don't even want to be around it that much. So I keep it in the shop should I need it, but I don't. I try not to use it at all because I found, I don't know, I think it was through another YouTuber, they were using distilled alcohol, or I read about that. And I'm like, hey, it's a lot cheaper, a whole lot easier on me. And inadvertently, when I don't have a pair of gloves on and I get some, I have to use that as a solvent to get something off my fingers real quick. I feel a lot better knowing that it's that versus acetone, which can affect your nervous system. And I mean, they all can, but you need to be really, I guess me anyways, diligent in getting the stuff that's the easiest on your body. Is something, you have to touch it, make sure it's not going to be something that's horrible. So I'm going to put this over here. Again, keep it out of the way. It's bound to get into it. And I'm going to put this on. There'll be squeeze out, just like with epoxy or anything else. And I've got these fastener holes marked so that I can quickly know if I need an 1.5 inch or an 1.25 inch screw, not be messing around, making sure I got the right one. So these are both 1.5 inch going in. Make sure I get this back edge first before I seal that one in. And like I said, I've got these pre-drilled, so I just have to make sure I find the hole, and I just ease into that hole. I don't want to make a new one. This stuff is so, I mean, this is a plywood shelf, and you can easily put a new screw hole in if you're not careful, and you know darn well that's not what you want. You have a hole there that you're trying to hit. I'll finish up this one. And there we go. There's my first rail is started, and I'm just going to work my way around this rail and get this all fastened in, and just keep working my way down the side of the boat, which isn't anything I'm sure you're going to want to watch in depth. So I'm going to go ahead and just start doing that, and then once we get the covering rails on, we can go ahead and put the rub rails underneath. So I didn't show the video of the splash rails going on because I was fastening them from the inside and there's not much to see, a couple screws and a lot of cleanup. So you can see I've got my nice squeeze out and I did the fillet. I use a really narrow artist knife to do that. Here's the rest of the bow. Good squeeze out. And again, this is going to get sanded again, so a lot of that will go away. But I wanted to make sure it was full, and I did. I took the palette knife and squeezed it back into the joints as much as I could. So I've got a good fillet on the spray rails, and now I will be able to sand a lot of that. You see the stuff on the transom, that'll get sanded out. It is easier to sand it if you're careful than it is to try to take it off with chemicals now, because it just creates a huge mess. So I leave it and then I go ahead and do a cleanup. So here are those palette knives I was telling you about. They're used for painting, and you can get them on eBay or on Amazon pretty cheap. They're just artist palette knives. So that will conclude this episode. I am so thankful that this is done. This has been a lot of hard work preserving what I could of the rub, cover, and spray rails, in addition to having to make more. It's been a long journey. So this was the final application of putting those back on. And you might say, why'd you use 5200 on a rub rail, on a spray rail? In my world, if I was to have to fix this boat someday because a spray rail, a rub rail, or a covering board was damaged, I would, number one, because there's paint on this, you could use fairing compound. If it's a deep injury to the boat, you would just cut it out and put a Dutchman in, scarf in a new piece. Be a whole lot easier than taking this off and trying to put a little something into that and putting it back on. I consider these pieces now part of the boat, and I'm happy to know that they're sealed and that the 5200 has sealed that joint, and there's silicone bronze screws that have pulled that joint tight with a good squeeze out, and then these fillets. So to make it a whole lot easier to paint and everything else. So I'm going to stick to that. In the past, I have done rub rails with dolphinite bedding compound because that's how I found it. And I try to stick to what I find if I think it's applicable. And that boat had a lot easier rub rail to recreate if you had to do that. So this is a real challenge to do this boat's rub rails and covering boards. So I can live with that, and I think the owner will be okay with that too. So this will end this episode. Thank you for tuning in. If you're enjoying the series, please hit the subscribe button so you get notifications on every 2 weeks on Wednesdays, if you can't remember. If you're enjoying the series and learning something and finding it entertaining, please hit the like button. It's always nice to receive positive feedback. And of course, if you have any comments or constructive criticism, please put those below and I'll answer them as fast as I can. So thank you and see you soon.